Hey everybody, since we are either starting a new series or reading a standalone book, I am jumping in to remind you what the rules are for this podcast. First rule is no real people stories. That means that any details from our own lives are merely anecdotal, and we are not reading any books that depict real people as their characters in any way or are based on historical events. Second rule is that we are judging everything off of how the author treats characters and what they put them through. We are not judging the accuracy of the trauma, the accuracy of any actual conditions that may be portrayed, or the authenticity of a character's reaction to that trauma or that particular condition. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts are not trained professionals, and their opinions come from personal experience, not professional training. In this episode, we discuss fictional depictions of trauma and violence that may not be suitable for all listeners, so please take care of yourselves. Specific content warnings for each episode can be found in the show notes. Events in the media are discussed in approximate order of escalation. This episode contains spoilers. This week, we are discussing the Hork Bajir Chronicles, set in the Animorphs universe by K.A. Applegate. We learn about the Hork Bajir before the Yeerks and meet a young Visser 3. Hi, I'm Nicole.
And I'm Robin, and this is Books That Burn. Alright, for the Hork Bajir Chronicles, we have Aldria Eskillen Falan, her father Prince Zero, her brother Barafin, and then her mother, I cannot find her mother's name.
I don't think we ever get her mother's name.
I hate when that happens.
Especially when we have everyone else's first name.
Like, everyone else. We have random Hork Bajir names, and we don't have Aldria's mother's name.
We have random Yeerks, and we don't have Aldria's mother's name.
Okay. Alright, continuing with the factions. We have Dak Hemi, Esplin 9466, Alarin Scimitar Karas, Quatsinicon, various Geds, Jagil and Delph, and then technically we have Tobias, Jera Hemi, Ket Halpak, and Toby Hemi. But that's in the framing device and not the main storyline. Are you ready for Esplin 9466?
Oh yeah, yes. Let's talk about this maybe? Awful... No, that's mean. That's not really mean to him.
So, we're just talking about this book and not the monster he becomes.
Yes, we should be clear that...
We know him by another name during the main series, and if you've already read the main series, you know what it is, and if you haven't, you don't care. And technically, they don't say the name in that text. Technically, this book set does not say that name anywhere.
It doesn't? Should we refer...
Nope. Esplin. He's Esplin.
Robin.
Yes?
I will cut this if I need to. Mm-hmm. It is entirely possible that there will be people that will listen to this podcast, that will listen to this episode, that have read the main bulk of the Animorphs books, and don't care to read the Chronicles, and want to listen to our episode to just get our opinion of the story and actually know the whole main story.
That is a strange combination of things that I have not considered. Lovely listeners, if you are in that camp, I apologize for not considering you. Esplin 9466 is Visser 3.
Yeah. And I'm only putting that out there because we did have a discussion like 3 minutes ago about the fact that you personally didn't care about some of those extra books for a very, very, very long time.
No, I cared about them. I didn't know they existed.
But I'm saying, like, it's possible for people, yeah, and that doesn't mean that they don't want to hear this episode, because it might be the thing that decides whether or not those extra books are worth it. We don't know. So, we should be, so yeah, Esplin will eventually become Visser 3.
Yes, but not yet.
Not yet.
He's super busy being various kinds of sub-Visser, and I'm not worried about all those designations.
No, we don't care about those.
How he's primarily known.
And they don't last outside this book anyway, so they do not matter. He leaves them in his past.
All right, so Esplin, 9466. We are talking about him and also talking about our second topic, because just because someone is hurt doesn't mean that they cannot also be a perpetrator. And Esplin is a very extreme example of this. And then our second character topic is a still significant example of this.
Yeah, we have a pretty, villainous cast of main characters. Yeah, it is.
This is a perpetrators get hurt sometimes too book.
And so we had an interesting conversation when we were kind of figuring out what we were talking about this episode, because Robin and I have very, very different opinions on Esplin in this book.
The general shape of my opinion is that in this book, he is traumatized by losing access to senses that he only had by taking over another creature's body. And it's a very narcissistic reaction. He feels helpless, but also when we're taking the perspective that the author has inflicted trauma on the character, the author created a species that can't have a full existence without some form of symbiosis with other species. A lot of the time, that symbiosis takes the form of parasitism. There could be an argument that when the Yeerks parasitize the Geds, that it's actually commensalism, where the Geds aren't harmed, but they're also not hurt. And parasitism is where the host is hurt. And
my general opinion of Esplin is that he is, quote-unquote, traumatized, much in the same way that an abuser feels traumatized when they lose access to their victim, and that he is traumatized in the same way that a narcissist blames the person that they are controlling, emotionally feeding off of when that person asserts boundaries or denies them access. And I will, so full disclosure, without spoilers, I am of this opinion because of partly I'm of this opinion, my opinion on the Yeerks as a race and their designation with the Jeds is actually an opinion that is formed based on evidence that we have in another book in the series, and I'm not going to get into spoilers in that book, but I have reasons that I believe that they are have more of a mutualism with the Jeds, and then they are parasitic toward any other species. Like, I have reasons for that from a different book, but I stand firm in my opinion of that being the case. Now, with Visser 3
being the situation where both species benefit.
Yes. I don't think it's as simple as one of them just kind of is along for the ride. Like, no, there's some other contextual evidence to support it being very, very beneficial to both parties.
And we're going to have a long argument when I get to that point in my reread, because...
Yeah, when Robin actually reads that book, we're going to talk about it for real. To be clear,
I have read them all before, but when I refer to that point in my reread, what I mean is that, hey, if anyone was paying attention to our Facebook and Twitter in January, February, and probably a little bit of March. It's January right now, so I'm just projecting how long this will take, where I was doing a whole bunch of Animorphs reviews. That's because we were doing this book, and I camouflaged it with rereading the entire series.
Reading all of the 62 plus books. So,
and reviewing all... It's 64.
Is it 64?
I don't remember... It's 64, but I don't remember if that's with or without Alternamorphs.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, Visser 3, I also do want to say, like, my opinion of Visser 3, I think, is a little bit colored by the way I treat abusers who try and make themselves appear the victim when they're essentially told stop or have boundaries put up, because that's a very like common thing in real life, where an abuser feels upset and hurt and when they're denied access to their victim in any way, shape, or form. And my very, very hard, strong reaction is to look at that person and say, you're not the victim. You're just upset that you don't get to control and hurt this other person anymore.
And to be clear, I do agree with that for Esplin.
Yeah. But it's just, I feel like my opinion on Esplin is just very, very colored by that being my reaction. I don't think he's a victim. I don't think he's traumatized. I think he's just upset that, you know what? Maybe you don't get access to other living creatures at your whim. Maybe you don't get to just take over sentient beings for kicks just because you like it. Like, that's where I look at that and say, I don't think he's traumatized.
So, my argument for why he is traumatized, but also I'm going to contrast it with how much more the other Yeerks, some of them, are traumatized.
Yes, we do need to talk about that, because that I do actually think is trauma.
You push... Well, yeah, so currently Nikki's pushing back about something that I haven't articulated. Here's my articulation. He has access to... So the Yeerks are a parasitic species that are basically slugs in liquid, and they have the ability to get inside the brains of other creatures and control them, and the host knows what's happening and can't do anything about it, and it is I can't use my mouth, but I must scream situation, if you're a species that has a mouth.
Which is negotiable in this series.
Yeah. Antlites don't have mouths. Anyway, so he gets in a host for the very first time in this book. Well, for the second time, it sounds like there was some other unspecified other instance that didn't have as many senses. He gets in a host for a meaningful time and is just astounded and kind of like squishes the Ged's brain down. He then is taken out of the Ged because there's a lot of Yeerks and not very many host bodies, and you gotta train him. Mm-hmm. And yes, it is a narcissistic reaction, but he is hurt and upset by no longer having access to these extra senses. But totally, it is a parasitic it is a narcissistic reaction about being denied something that he feels is owed to him when it is not, and I do agree with that. So then with the Yeerks that are not him, he apparently talked to some of his friends and family after his experience in the host, and most of them were traumatized by being in a host because, like, having senses and limbs and eyes and it's too much. It was very disorienting and stressful. And I liked, even though he is a terrible, terrible person, I liked that by getting his perspective, we got a window into the Yeerk society in this cool way. So, part of why I wanted to talk about him. And also because, again, people aren't terrible and also never victims, but that doesn't excuse anything that they do. And I wanted this opportunity to make that point, because we've had a lot of, like, clear cut, this person gets hurt, this person's the one hurting other people. And I like how this, like, messes with that, like, black and white sense. Like, there's gradients, but it doesn't stop some people from being very far on the side of they are inflicting way more pain than they have experienced.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know. I feel like our next topic is going to be much more of a
it's going to be more give and take.
We're going to be more in agreement, because our next topic is definitely somebody who was hurt and then turns around and hurts other people. I just really feel like Esplin is just he wants this thing even at the cost of other people, and he had a taste of it, and now he just wants to control other people forever, and that's just how he wants to live.
And later on, he controls a mind that is not as easily... It is as easily squished, but it's not as quiet. And,
yeah, like, there's a lot of just, like, Esplin wants it, and if he's denied, he doesn't throw, like, a toddler tantrum, but that's only because he was never a human toddler to have that as an example. like he's an alien creature. He does not throw a human toddler tantrum, but he literally has access to this other living creature's senses and body, and then is upset when it's taken away, even temporarily, and like, no, man, that's not your, like, you don't get to be hurt by being denied that. Like, that's not your, like, I just feel like it's not his right to even, like, he's literally, like, upset that he can't just control living creatures all the time, and... Yeah.
Sorry, I must... So, Nikki, you're saying that his right to swing your fist ends at your face? His right to swing your fist ends at your face? I'm sorry.
I guess. I do know the thing you're quoting, but also, like, I don't understand the twist that just happened, but it's okay. Yeah, probably.
Okay.
But yeah, I just feel like, I don't know. I think he's definitely somebody, like, I did agree that he should be our topic. I don't know. I feel like Robin and I just have very different reactions to his character, which is important for us to talk about, because just because, so this is something where the way an author shapes the way they treat their characters in the book gives people their opinions. And I do find it very, very interesting that Robin and I both read the same things about Esplin in his early life and came to different conclusions. Even so far as, like, whether or not he's traumatized. Like, I just find it, like, that's really the conversation here, is that K.A. Applegate set up this character who is upset when he's not allowed to just do whatever, even with other people's free will. Like, he's upset when he's not allowed to run roughshod over it. And it's written in such a way where we can make our own opinion of that. And
I think I
compartmentalize
really cool. Characters a lot more than you do is part of it.
That's
and
fair.
So
yeah.
I have a lot more of, like, tiny pieces of information that I can look at separate from each other and then place them into a frame, and it feels more like you just kind of, like, have more of a holistic view than I do.
Well, I mean, we've talked in our lifetimes multiple times about the fact that you are very much a data bytes person, and I'm very much of a formulaic system person. I'm that person who sees the world like a bush of that one spider who makes 3D circular webs in the bush, and if you pull one string, these 17 things shift slightly. Like, that's how I see everything. I very much don't compartmentalize, and Robin does.
I definitely, like, keep my head down, focus on one small bit of this complicated thing at a time, and then, like I build very complicated spreadsheets.
Oh, yeah. But one cell at a time.
One cell at a time, and often I look at the spreadsheet that I made and I am disoriented by how much went into it, and I'm like, oh boy, sure glad I didn't have to do all of that at once.
And see, like, I grasp onto things that require me to track multiple thread lines in synchronicity because I need it to be that complex, because I will pull, like, it's I think you're right. I think it is partly a difference in how we process.
I also have musical training in a way that I did not keep up with because my brain just hated that. It was not helpful for me.
I thrive on that. It is I think part of the reason I really love music is that it is always that complex.
Yeah. They are HeartBeatArt who made all our music. Like,
hello. Yep.
Moving on to Aldrea, Death and Revenge. The very big thing that happens that is the main trauma for her is that her family is killed in front of her in very dramatic beam from space right as she runs up and is too late to warn them fashion.
Perfect timing for her to not get injured by the heat or the laser.
Exactly.
But also see it all in crisp rendered detail.
Yeah. It's done very dramatically where, like, she describes them still being alive and it's like, I don't want to think what happens next. Okay, chapter change. Here's what happened next.
Yeah. Can I just say, props to K.A. Applegate, because there are some authors that will do that kind of thing that I read it and it's, like, stressful to read and it's, like, frustrating to read. K.A. Applegate, the way that she does it, I never dislike that kind of transition, and she does it kind of a lot.
Yeah.
I just think it's done very well. Just a good job.
So now that her family is dead, she swears revenge, and she had already been manipulating Dak, but, like, ramps it up to use him to make their goals align align? Maybe?
Align is a very strong word.
She works very hard to make
her goals into his.
To make him feel like their goals are lining up, but he keeps seeing through it and being like, why are you doing that? You could just say what you want. Yes?
Yeah.
No.
Do we want to kind of say our rundowns? You can start.
Sure, yeah. So, part of why I wanted to talk about Aldrea, even though Nicole had stated prior to the podcast that they didn't like Aldrea, it's okay. I don't like Aldrea either. I don't like Aldrea because of terrible things she does in a book that is not this one. Part of why I wanted to talk about her is because she's part of the general shape of kind of what feels to me like the theme of this book, to be that you can be a victim and a perpetrator. We already talked about this with Esplin, but it's more nuanced and it's more, like, squishy with Aldrea, because Esplin is a clear-cut villain in the rest of the series as Visser 3, and Aldrea is not in it very much. That's the kindest thing I can say about her. Nicole.
Okay. So
you had your take.
My thought process with this character is I love her as a character. She's very well written. She's very, for a book with very few pages, she's very nuanced. And also she does a good job of being a villain who sees themselves as the hero, and the way the text is written, we get, like, a pretty good view of, like, Aldrea sees herself as the heroic, trying to survive victim of all of these things. And at the same time, we also have Dak looking at her going, hey, I know that you're awful. But also, like, we're still this thing. So here's my opinion on Aldrea. She starts out manipulating Dak into codependency in a way that, where I honestly would argue that I think that she does genuinely care for Dak as a, like, an I care about you kind of way, but I would also argue that it's kind of, it's very much in line with the narcissistic, abusive spouse. She's very controlling of him. She's very manipulative of him. She pushes him into codependency in a way that looks abusive to me and she says it. Like, that's the thing. She explicitly says in the text that she gives Dak information and understanding of maths and science and Andalite, just understanding of the universe, the universes, I think, even. And she does it not because she thinks she wants him to have the knowledge and not because he wants the knowledge, but she does it because then he is dependent on her. And she says that outright in the text. And later in the book, there's a moment where Aldrea, where the Hork Bajir are under threat of extermination through chemical genetic warfare, virus warfare. I think is that chemical warfare?
Biological warfare.
That's the word I'm looking for. Okay. They're under threat of biological extermination through biological warfare. And Aldrea looks at Dak and says, I'll turn into a Hork Bajir forever. I'll morph and get caught in that morph, and then we can be together forever and we'll live or die together. And Dak looks at her and just thinks, you're lying to me. And then later, after, I don't remember if he calls her out on it out loud or just in his head.
Or if we just had his perspective for that.
I think it was his perspective. Because I think it was her perspective going into that base, that room, and then it switched perspectives, and then she said it, and he was like, ooh, you won't. This is a trick. This is a lie. She's lying again to me again for no reason again, instead of being truthful again. But then, then there's this moment where Esplin finds out that Aldrea is not only the Andalite body that he craves above all, but also has this morphing capability that until he finds out about it at that moment, no Yeerk knew about, and really, honestly, like, a handful of Andalites even knew about, because it wasn't just general tech at the time.
It's kind of a plot point that a lot of Andalites don't know about it. It's what lets her do some of what she does. Yes.
Like, she has this thing through child nefarious proximity to scientists who just were, letting the kid have some fun kind of thing. It's kind of the perspective that we're kind of handed.
Gentle pushback on the word nefarious, but otherwise I have no qualms with that assessment.
I mean, she uses it nefariously. I would argue, the only reason I say it's nefarious is because, like, her parents don't know. And she takes great pains to never let them know the whole time. Like, she knows that she's not supposed to have this ability. Like, it's not just, like, secret tech that they just didn't have access to. Like, no, it's a secret that she is keeping. Even, like, yeah. Anyways, we could talk about that for a while, too. Like, there's a whole thing with her dynamic with her parents, but moving on. So then Esplin finds out that this Andalite body that he wants also has this morphing ability, and after she knows that he knows that she can do this and lives, that's the point where she actually transforms into a Hork Bajir and then stays there forever. And and Dak calls her out on it then and basically says, like, hey, I thought you were lying. And she literally looks him in the face and goes, oh, I was lying to you. I'm not lying now, and I'm doing it for real now, but I 100% lied to you before. And everything she does is just using him because she wants something. And she looks him in the face and lies and manipulates to him, and when he calls her out on it, she goes, yeah, you're right, I'm being awful. Like,
I half wonder if she really would have stayed in the morph if they hadn't gotten knocked unconscious. I don't know.
That's a very good point. I have no idea. Like, that's a good question, honestly.
And, yeah. No idea.
So, yeah, that's my opinion on Aldrea. I think she's a great character. I think she's a terrible person. And I think that her relationship with Doc is super codependent and manipulated. She wanted him to be codependent kind of way. And
there's language like, if they were... I must like him because if there were other Andalite... Basically, it's like, if there were other Andalite males, I'd be very horny right now, but there's just Dak. So, not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, like, she's like, well, you know, I'm of the age to be interested in males, and man, if only I could choose someone from my own species, I guess this one will have to do, like,
guess I'll just join his species. Yeah. Also, there's no hesitation when, like, the way she gets the DNA for the Hork Bajir that she turns into.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
There's
like
no consideration that she's... It's just, look how acquiring works. See me acquiring somebody?
Yeah. Like, okay, even putting aside the whole, would the Hork Bajir, what's her name? I know we wrote it down. Would Delph even have been able to consent? Like, that's a whole, like, okay, acquiring an animal that is physically incapable of communication with you and is non-sentient is a whole different discussion than acquiring a creature who is sentient and can't understand to give consent. That's a whole different... Those are like Aldrea, acquiring that flying treetop creature is not the same thing as acquiring a being that has a mind of its own outside of instinct. Canonically speaking.
In a little bit of a perspective. Like, I agree with you. I just have more thoughts in this direction. Absolutely.
Go for it.
I would like to bring in a perspective that I have from reading the first 13 books and then this book, which is the proper reading order if you're trying to get the best. Oh yeah,
if you're trying to go like quote unquote chronologically.
Yeah, if you're trying to get the order that makes the most sense and will have the fewest spoilers at every turn. Yeah. That's what you should do.
Yep.
At this point, the Animorphs, in the continuity of when the author did these, the Animorphs have already had discussions of like, is a whale so intelligent that it crosses ethical lines to be able to morph? So my main point with it is we know the author has thought about this.
Yes.
The author has thought about this a lot and written about this a lot. And I'm not going to spoil what the Animorphs decide about all this because, like, you know, read the series. But we have evidence that the author puts thought into this elsewhere, and then
that makes this deliberate.
Exactly. And then Aldrea just acquires Delph with no, like, hey, can I look like you? Like,
right. Like, there would have been ways to frame it. Like, is it okay if I look like you for a bit? Is it okay if I hold your hand and become a Hork Bajir? Like, I want to be like, there's before nothing. This,
which establishes Jera and Ket, who are in the framing device. The book immediately before this, they are Hork Bajir of average Hork Bajir intelligence, and permission is still asked before anybody acquires them.
Yes.
And then back to back this book, there isn't. It's totally deliberate. I feel more and more like Aldrea just is a villain.
Oh no! Yeah, absolutely. Aldrea, this is such a rare, I feel like, book where we absolutely have. We don't just have a villain where it's like, ooh, fan fiction from their point of view. They're gonna think themselves the hero. Like, no, we have a canonical book with a villain as the main character who sees themselves as a victim while they go around doing their villainous deeds.
And in this book, we have two. And I had never thought about it before this way. I had been like, oh, I don't like Aldrea, but I guess she's a good person.
Oh, I have never seen Aldrea as a good person reading this series.
Yeah, like, never. If I viewed just this book, I was like, oh, revenge, that makes sense. Like, in middle school, like, when I was reading these the most, middle school and a bit into high school, like, I didn't think of it like that. I was like, oh, Andalites are good, Yerks are bad, and
oh my gosh,
moving on. Like, not that I didn't have any nuance, but I didn't have.
You didn't have this.
I didn't have this level of it, and so I'm really glad we're talking about this. I am have Dak Hami, and so much happens to Dak. The big...
There's a lot of there's a lot of big things.
Overarching and related to our last topic thing is that he's being manipulated by Aldrea. The existential reason why his species exists is being manipulated by the Arn. The back to Aldrea, manipulated into murder and teaching his whole species to murder. With the added weight that he is literally the only Hork Bajir, unless there's a seer in one of the other valleys, he's the only Hork Bajir that we know of who can even understand what a monumental shift is, because for all the other ones, that's just what they're doing now.
Yeah, there's a
lot going on with Dak.
There's a lot going on with Dak, and can I just say, okay, so talking about how the author treats Dak, I really like that, again, we get an author who takes a character who's being manipulated and has that character in a book, actually kind of written for middle schoolers, written for children. We get, again, an author who has a character who is being manipulated, who directly calls out that manipulation and says, "You are manipulating me." And this time it's not gaslighting. It's just straight up lies. But also, a
lot of passive-aggressive.
Yes. Yeah. But we have the way the character is treated. Dak is a victim and also given the voice to say, hey, that's not okay. Now, does Dak really have, I don't know, any, actual agency in the situation, or is he just kind of along for the ride? He's got kind of false agency, but he's really just kind of at the mercy of his manipulators, but we don't see him just believing the lies. And I think
Dak has a lot of agency, he just has mostly bad options.
Well, that would be the lack of agency part. I feel like I feel like if you don't have options, your agency is being taken from you, which is okay. Sorry. I think we're just wording it different.
I meant agency in an intellectual capacity in comparison to the other Hork, but here, agency as a character, it's limited.
Yeah, I meant agency as
his narrative agency is very limited.
Yeah,
his character design in comparison to his peers' agency is very expanded.
Yes. But yeah, I just wanted to say props to KA for it's very well written, and again, it's written without him having to fix it. It's just a thing, and it's pointed out as it's done.
So he's really pulled between two narcissists. Luckily for our listeners, they are the narcissists we've already talked about. So refer to those sections for their goals and aims and things.
Yeah.
The way that it affects Dak, I mentioned this a little bit, but I think this is the point to linger on.
Yeah.
Is that he understands what murder is, and at Aldrea's behest and at the pressure created by the Yeerks being there, he is pushed into teaching his species to murder. And there's a bit where they're dancing on Yeerks to
literally
kill them.
Yeah.
No hyperbole, literally dancing. There might not have been music involved, but movement-wise, that's what's happening. And by the end of the book, they're guerrilla fighters, and this is...
And proud of it.
Yeah.
And don't really understand it, and they're still proud of it, because they're following instructions so well.
Yeah, gosh. It makes me, want to draw comparisons to things in other books.
Yeah, so, same. I have one I want to talk to you about after the podcast is over. Yeah, maybe not definitely. Tonight, but...
Yeah, not tonight. It's late. Not for you listeners, or at least not necessarily for you, but just past midnight right now. Yeah,
fun fact, we record now very late on Fridays. Very late for Robin.
This is our first attempt at recording late in the evening. So back to what we can talk about in this book. This author has previously explored, in other books, the way that being innocent or childlike is not the same thing as being peaceful. By previously explored, I mean it is 2020, and by this point they've previously explored it. At this point in the canon, they haven't totally fleshed that out yet. Anyway, we know it's a thing that the author is going to explore more later. I'm fuzzy on the continuity as to when it was in their thoughts. I don't know. It's just I'm feeling the weight.
Which part are you looking at?
Teaches the species to murder is.
Oh, so continuity on that one.
Yeah,
I would have to double check.
So this was definitely published first, so this was definitely published before the stuff that were the Kree. If you've read the thing, it's Kree is what we're dancing around. If you haven't read them, that won't mean anything to you. But this isn't our only depiction in this series of murder and death inflicted by those who are not mentally able to understand what's happening. And since we have the perspective of the one Hork Bajir who is guaranteed to understand what's happening, it's hard to speak to how totally they do or don't get it.
Yeah, in later books we get explicitly how they don't get it. In this book, we just know that they are essentially playing copycat without any understanding of the implications of what they're doing. There's no existential understanding, and
they might gradually learn more. And in the framing device, there are Hork Bajir who know how to do stuff.
Yeah, but those Hork Bajir also kind of, I feel like growing up with a yerk in your head is a little bit different than just growing up and then, if I slash at something, it falls over and stops moving. There's a bunch different framing there.
There's this scene that, feels kind of endless, but is actually only a very short part of the book, where Dak is introduced to the concept that his blades could hurt somebody on purpose. And he's the smart one. And the paradigm shift he has to work through in his brain.
Oh my gosh.
Is so difficult and so stressful. And he's the one whose intelligence rivals the Arn, canonically.
Yeah, and
makes me wonder if he's smarter than Aldrea, because the Arn are pretty dang smart.
Well, I want to avoid intelligence comparisons.
No, the only reason I'm bringing it up is because the Aldrea, a lot of her entitlement and superiority is wrapped up in the idea that she is smarter than him and is benevolently teaching him all this stuff, but he just needs access to knowledge and training, and it just...
Yeah, I'm thinking more of we don't want to just...
there's, to me, I'm not trying to imply some kind of hierarchy or better or worse.
Yeah,
I'm just pushing back. I'm pushing back against the narrative that the Andalites have, where...
Oh, absolutely. The Andalites think they are the single best thing that ever happened to existence.
Exactly. And so for the seers among the Hork Bajir to be possibly more intelligent than Andalites, or at least so close as makes no difference and fits within the variation of Andalite intelligence, because there's going to be a range. To me, I think that's important existentially, maybe more so for the entire series than just this book.
Yeah,
but with all that, he is so smart, and he didn't think about hurting someone on purpose ever, because it just wasn't part of how he was raised, because the people raising him didn't have the concept. And I'm sorry if I'm going in circles a little bit. It just, emotionally, this scene had so much weight.
Oh, it's such a good scene. I do want to put in a quick contextual note in case we have listeners who have not read the series but still want to just listen for any reason. So there is, in this series, and this is also, and I'm only really putting this in this discussion because this is a highlight episode. So we're not going to come back and, give this a lot of extra topic in other episodes. This is probably our only one. If we do,
in 3 years, it'll be that we dip back for the Animorphs Chronicles,
because it's a very good book. And so I want to point out that discussions of who is more intelligent than who is not accidentally having to happen with very ableist language, because the way these characters are written, the characters and the Andalites as a species are incredibly ableist. Just incredibly
so ableist.
Hyper ableist. So when we are comparing in our discussion and saying, like, Dak rivals an Andalite for intelligence,
I say it because that's going to be upsetting to the Andalites.
Well, and it's not because we are looking at them and saying, well, if Dak can keep up with the intelligent Andalite, no. It's because the Andalites literally look at themselves and say, we are the smartest, we are the best. How dare you imply that we have disabled among us? Like, that's a thing. That happens.
Oh,
like they are hyper ableist as a society, and so our discussion of,
I don't remember the number, but the one where Marco is a bee is,
that's it. Yeah. There's and I think it is not an accident, and so our discussion here is not a reflection of, I hope, not a reflection of ableist ideas that we hold, but more that we're looking at the way these characters are written, and the Andalites are just ableist to a gross and not murderous degree, but neglectfully death-inducing degree, I would say. It's not great.
No, they are.
I just think that's important in this discussion of intelligence.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not trying to say that it's good or bad that he is or is not smarter, or that matters at all.
But it matters to Aldria.
It matters to Aldria because, and he keeps pushing back on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I
very much. It's just such a weird. It's very well written. I like Kay's. She does a good job with, I don't know, just a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and we're saying K.A. because Catherine Applegate is a person who writes a bunch of books. K.A. Applegate is the pen name for Catherine and her husband Michael and whatever ghostwriters they have throughout the series. So that's why we're saying K.A., because that refers to this whole collective of everybody.
I'm also just trying to be more informal than K.A. Applegate. Like, it's fine.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just K.A. instead of...
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is all I have for her. Or for him.
Yep. For Dak Hemi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that in.
On to the wrap-up and ratings. For our gratuity rating. For... Name dropped out of my head.
Epsilon.
Epsilon. What's the gratuity rating?
Oh, man.
I'd say the gratuity rating for what happened and what he's doing.
So here's the thing. I am probably gonna... Well, this is hard, because...
I think
at some level... Yeah, I think it's... Well, this is the struggle that's going on in my head, because...
So, may I say my thought? Or... My thought is, it's mild for what's happening to him, but he thinks it's severe. And it's severe for what he's doing because he thinks his thing was severe.
I was actually going to argue it from a little bit more reader-centric perspective. I'm debating in my head whether it's severe because of body horror content and body takeover content, or if it's mild because of not being very graphic and being very treated very sci-fi, very just real mild language. I wasn't thinking about Epslin's opinion at all.
No, not his opinion. I was just... we have technically two different aspects of his topic. The two parts of his topic are what happened to him and what he did to other people.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just thinking...
That was my split of, I think what happened to him was mild and is depicted mildly. And what he did to other people was severe and is depicted somewhere between moderate and severe. My only hesitation on putting it on severe would be because the rest of Animorphs is way darker than this.
But also, like, Animorphs has some such pretty severe topics, but they're written in such a way that they're not...
That's what the care rating is for.
7...
Okay, so moderate...
That's true.
Because it doesn't make it feel like it's happening to you.
It doesn't make it... It's very removed, but very descriptive removed from the reader language.
Okay.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, so yeah. If you...
Aldria. For gratuity... somewhere between moderate and severe. Moderate?
It's so hard. These are so light. They're so quick. I think moderate.
Yeah. It kind of adds up.
It kind of adds up, and again, like, emotionally, the impact... We get a very good view of its emotional impact on Aldria, but as a reader...
I'd say there's one scene that I have no qualms about saying is severe.
Okay.
But most of it is moderate.
Okay. Yeah. I'm okay with moderate, because I also feel like this is one of those series where, as a child, if I were asked this question, I would have said mild. There is something to be said. And, like, I know this is a beloved child series that children read for kicks. And I just feel like having an adult perspective on it makes it more darker, because we, as adults, have more of a perspective on the topics, I guess.
The gratuity rating is the one where I've started to feel more and more like I do the gratuity rating, and then you ask me to tweak it, and I say yes or no. Because, sorry, your sense is skewed. It is skewed, yes, but I'm saying it was severe the whole time, and that's the whole, but the whole premise of this is that trauma in books can be a safe way to process big emotions.
Even though the trauma itself is severe. Okay. Alright. Okay, that's fair.
Right, yeah. It's a safe place to process this. These are great books.
Oh, they're beautiful.
You either haven't read them or you love these books. Like, I've never met someone who's ambivalent about Animorphs. I've met people who are hostile because they just thought they were weird, but those people didn't read them. They just looked at the covers. If you read them, Like, if you made it past book 5 and you didn't quit because of body horror, our general survey or casual survey of just knowing people that we've talked to is you either read these and really liked them or didn't or barely read them.
I would like all of our listeners to know that our senior assistant editor just came up to say hi.
Hello, senior assistant editor.
She is super excited to possibly have her purring picked up on the mic. We'll see when I go back to listen to this later.
I don't hear it, so we'll see. All right, so then Dak.
Severe.
It's
this one I have no qualms about saying severe.
Yep, it's severe. Now, is the trauma integral to the plot? Yes, all around?
No.
No. Oh, okay. Cool. Okay, so one by one if it's not yes all around. Wait, Epslin's is not integral.
Esplin, we had a whole conversation about whether or not it was even trauma.
Yeah, I guess if we had a whole conversation about whether or not it was in the plot, then it's probably irrelevant. I would say as, like... And
also, as a background book, we didn't need this character here.
That's true.
We didn't even need his perspective. We didn't even need his whole storyline. This is a 3-narrator book. It could have been a 1-narrator book.
Okay.
He's irrelevant.
That's a good point.
Don't tell him I said that, because then he'll morph something and devour me. But also, I think he's irrelevant.
Yeah, he would hard disagree with you on that. He would hard disagree on you having individuality of any kind.
He would hard disagree with me having my own human thoughts still.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep.
I'm vetoing him. No, I think he's irrelevant.
Yep.
I think he's interesting. He makes the book more interesting, but he's irrelevant to the plot.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right.
Take that, Yerk. No, I'm just kidding.
I guess as long as the bad things still happened, it really didn't matter which of the million Yerks did it or whether we heard from them. Interesting.
Yep.
His big contribution is, I think there's 4 of them.
Honestly, his big contribution is just us finding out more of his backstory.
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know. It's got like a Forrest Gump, I was here sort of a feel.
Yeah, but we also kind of learn a little bit more about the Yerk hierarchy and structure, and
it builds a bunch
more about them as a species. It
builds a lot of cool things about the world, but if you only read this book, you didn't need him.
Like, let's put it this way. We rated his trauma as moderate. He could have been not a narrator character, and we would have said he is backstory or off screen.
Yeah. And it wouldn't have hurt the plot.
It would not have hurt the plot at all. This is very much a very cool background story where we are also peppered in with just a little bit of personal and also species history. Like, he's irrelevant. All right,
we've given him enough of our time. No more.
Yes.
No more
to the irrelevant.
Other than the other ratings. Okay, Aldria it's integral.
Yeah.
Okay, drives the plot. All right. Dak Hami, also integral. Was the trauma treated with care? For Epsilon, I think so.
I think yes.
Yeah,
I think yes, and I think yes, because we didn't even get, like, this whole series, all of the trauma is treated with care. Like, this this series, and this is in our this will be in all of our content. Well, it'll actually be in our content warning about him, even though we didn't really like get into it, just as a general Animorphs content warning. There's a lot of body horror in this book, in this whole series, just a lot, and it's treated with so much care. Also,
we don't consider that a spoiler because if you looked at the covers of literally any of these, you know that
it's the whole plot.
Yeah.
It's the whole hook of the series is that kids transform into animals and we like read about it happening. Like, yeah, it's like Robin said, it's given away on every single cover. And if you flip through a lot of the books, you'll get to see it in like
on the bottom of the
form
thing.
On the bottom of the pages.
I'm reading PDFs for this, so I had forgotten about that. It's like, oh yeah.
I had fun. I actually have it in my copy of the Hork Bajir Chronicles.
Oh, yeah.
And I pulled it out and was just like, yes. I wish more books had things like this.
It's in the Hork Bajir Chronicles. I had just read.
Yeah, and even for as many discussions of it as there are, like, I would argue that every single book, it's treated either just with care or with enough care. Like, these are not horrific. These aren't horror books. They're content-wise, they should be. But the way they're written, nope. So, yeah, I think it was definitely treated with care. Aldria. I think also treated with care.
Yeah, and the same for Dak.
Even that one scene. I think Dak was treated with enough. Only because of that one scene that we had talked about where he had that whole moment of realization.
Oh yeah,
like, he has some pretty good existential realizations in here, and I don't think they're traumatic for the reader because I do think they're treated with enough care. But I think that he definitely goes through them on screen, which I think I think those particular topics to have been totally just treated with care would have had to have been almost off screen. Or in much couchier language.
Alright, point of view, trauma and aftermath. Our points of view for the three traumas are
them.
It's them. For each of them, we get some of the others witnessing their thing.
Yes.
But, like, it's these three characters. We only have their perspective. For each of their things, we have the most on their perspective. Weirdly, for Aldria's, we have the most from Dak's perspective, because Aldria doesn't lend a lot of her internal monologue to the stuff that is so problematic.
Yeah.
So, it in terms of depicting what we talked about, it skews toward Dak, but...
Yeah, but we also skewed toward Dak.
Yeah.
I think just as a...
We skewed...
Let me be specific. I skewed toward Dak.
Yeah. Nikki skewed
that was my fault.
Toward Dak, which is fine. But they are the points of view for the trauma, the aftermath, the everything.
Dak Hamia is my favorite tragic character in Shakespeare literature. I'm just kidding. He's not the tragic one. It's okay.
I had a wild left field take where I wanted to argue that the point of view is actually the narrator in the framing device. But it's okay.
But this
is a joke answer. It's a joke answer. It's fine.
I was like, could we? No, we can't. That doesn't. Yeah, that's a very good joke, but also I'm gonna veto it. That's a real answer.
Do you have an aspiring writer tip?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is, and I do want to. I said this at one point in one of our topics, but I'm going to kind of state it here as part of my aspiring writer tip. I just want to let our audience know, kind of a reminder, this is a highlight episode. So my aspiring writer tip is geared toward the series as a whole. And I have read the entire series. A lot. Many times in my lifetime. My aspiring writer tip is that subjects and topics and stories that you want to tell don't belong to specific genres. K.A. Applegate does a very, very, very beautiful job of writing almost a superhero style, save the day, fight the fight, have not magic powers, but scientifically magic, transformational superpowers.
Sufficiently advanced technology, indistinguishable from magic, that whole deal.
Thank you, Babylon 5. You will live forever in my heart. That is not a joke. I love Babylon 5. But anyways, K.A. Applegate takes a horror story. It's a horror story. It's an aliens take over humanity story. It's a parasites take over sentient parasites take over sentient hosts horror story. It's a bloodshed and warfare horror story. It's a child warrior horror story. K.A. Applegate takes a lot of horror trope, horror genre stories and turns them into superhero books. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to read. It's a thing that is kind of aimed at middle school-ish, but like when I was in grade school, I had a lot of friends that were reading these already. It's not traumatic for kids. It's fun to read. It's fun to read. It's beautiful. It's not a horror story, but it is a horror story. But it's not a horror genre book. And it's not, and this is, I don't want to give spoilers, but not every ending in this series is happy. And there's a lot of endings in this series. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different plot lines we're following, and not all of them are happy. They don't always save the day. It's not always a success. And it's still not a horror genre, but it's a horror story. And I just want to just say, like, I have a lot of multiple writer friends, and I've heard a lot of times from different various writers, whether I know them personally or not, that sometimes it's very, very hard to put out your writing when you're not writing that thing that you know is expected of you, especially when you set out to write this genre. You feel like there are rules that you have to subscribe to. And my writer tip is that you don't have to follow those rules. If you have a story you want to tell, and you have a genre that you want to tell it in, they don't have to match. They really don't. And this is a very good example of it being done incredibly well. So that's my tip for this series is, if you want to write the story, do it. And it's possible to write it in the genre rules and still tell your story from a different perspective or a different genre. Go for it. Write the story you want to write.
Favorite non-traumatic thing about the book?
About this book?
Yeah.
I want you to go first because I'm curious if we're going to end up with the same one, even though I think we won't. Did you not have one yet?
I was taking a minute because I didn't have one yet. Okay. What did you have?
Sorry. So I had two.
Okay.
If that's permissible.
Mm-hmm.
My first one is just, I really like the description of the Hork Bajir's planet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Squished like a ripe ukamelon. And I have a mental image that I have held on to, because it's also described as being, I think, red.
Yeah.
On the outside with like deep blue interior. So I've always in my head kind of pictured a cantaloupe with a red rind, and it's been stepped on, so it's cracked open, and the orange pulp inside is actually blue.
Ugh. Huh, okay.
That was my childhood image when I read this book, and I think it is... I should add, floating in space inside an asteroid belt for some reason. That's what, 12-year-old me or whatever thought was great.
Well, they did mention asteroids, so...
Oh, did they? So I didn't pull that out of the
It was an asteroid that smashed it and made the planet look like that.
You know what?
That's not out of nowhere. That's probably why
that makes sense. As to why I would have hooked onto that imagery. Yeah, but I just had this picture of a cantaloupe that had been squished and popped open, and for some reason I just really like that picture. I think it's pretty. I wish maybe someday I'll try and paint it or draw it, because it's very vivid in my head. My second favorite non-traumatic thing about this book is I really just love Dakami showing Aldria how to fly through the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just...
cool.
It's really cool. I love the descriptions of how the trees are and function, and how they are and function, and without spoilers, I just want to say I just really like how Dakami is portrayed and how that fun thing is portrayed, and I think it's a beautiful moment.
I thought of a thing. Technically not traumatic. I really like the description.
Usually I'm the one saying that. This is a twist.
I really like the description of all the monsters that the Arn created.
Oh.
Especially the one that is 3 feet tall and 20 feet wide. And that's... and it's got mouths, and that's what we know about it.
Oh my god. Okay. If anybody, I just want everybody to know.
Also, one of those creatures is the morph from book 11.
Yes. Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yep.
So
I just want everyone to know that when Robin is talking about that 20-foot wide, 3 feet tall monster, if anyone has seen the Monster Factory series by Polygon, the Spore episode, where the Griffin makes a creature that is just a tube with a lot of mouths, and it drifts into food. My mental image is like that, except no spikes and giant, and not a one-celled organism, or it's not one-celled, but they're microscopic in that video at that point, because it's Spore. It's like stage 1. But yeah, that's my mental image for that.
Alright, that's all I have. Did you have anything else? If not, then we'll say goodbye to our listeners.
Goodbye, listeners.
Goodbye, and please join us in a fortnight. We're so happy to have you. Bye. All music used in this podcast was created by Nicole as HeartBeatArt Co. and is used with permission.
You can follow us on Twitter at Books That Burn, all one word.
You can email us with questions, comments, or book recommendations at booksthatburn@yahoo.com.
Support us on patreon.com/booksthatburn. All patrons get access to our upcoming book list and receive a one-time shout-out.
You can leave us an iTunes review. This helps people to find the show.
And find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.